Good. You can see me and I can, you don't have to, it's good. I got the big thumbs up from the back. So welcome everybody. Our subject tonight is jobs. How's the volume? I'm not really used to speaking in the mic. I have lots of projection. I'll try not to go overboard. So jobs. I've always done my best job as a lieutenant to generals, the various generals of the world that I've put my muscle behind. Much like in NASH, radar, remember radar was always running around behind Colonel Potter, or Colonel Blake, and reminding him that, you got to sign here, sir, and don't forget to make sure that you tell everybody that the latrines are closed for a week, and all of the basic, very essential things to keep the MASH unit going forward. So I found that I have done my best job and sort of as the radar of the world behind the creative geniuses, backing them up, holding them up. And I think that all started with my mother. My mother and my father started a theater back in 1950, right here on the Cape, the Orleans Arena Theater, America's first summer stock theater in the round. And my parents did it together for about 13 years, but in 1963 my father decided he had other mountains to climb and he moved on, and my mother was not content to take up a job as a librarian or a waitress or teaching, so she decided she was going to go on with the theater with the 3 small children, and I was the oldest at 10. So maybe this is indeed where I began to say, I'm going to keep propping this thing up here. So 10 years old, 9 years old was my sister, and our brother, our youngest brother, was 4 years old. So very brave MASH unit going out into the world. I remember the first real job that she brought me in on. She decided to fire the stage manager. I was 13, and she came up storming up the hill. Oh, we lived up behind the theater. We had a house where we housed the family and the 30 theater people, the artists, the technicians who lived with us and then worked doing the theater all summer. So she came storming up the hill to the house, pulled me out of bed, barefoot, of course, because it was summer on Cape Cod, so we didn't wear shoes anyways. I raced down the hill behind her as she filled me in on what I was about to do, which was basically to mind the book and record all of the blocking for the actors, make sure the props were in place, and then the lights went on at the right time and the lights went off at the right time. So that became my job, and I have to say I did very, very well. My sister couldn't hold a candle to me when it was her turn. She dissolved into tears regularly, so this is one of those wonderful, I have a claim. That was my first job as a person behind a creative genius. And I remember walking through the dressing rooms, and part of my job was to let the actors know how much that we all know that we were in communication, everybody knew what was going on. So those were fine memories, and they trained me up very well. And but as I grew old in my job, meaning 14, 15, 16 years old, I grew weary, and I decided as soon as I was old enough to move out from the home and the theater, and I became a magician's assistant. What else would you do when you learn how to operate so well behind the scenes? So I worked for about a year and a half as a magician's assistant, and it's a little hard for me to remember going back to age 17, but I think somehow it was the 70s, and we were all involved in the peace movement, living communally. And I think this guy was a recovering alcoholic, and he was part of the commune, and we all worked to get his act back on the road. And we were successful. I was the magician's assistant. I was scantily clad, and I was very small, so I could get in. I can't reveal too much, but there was a lot about being able to get very small in the boxes. So one of my favorite tricks was when I got put into the box to be sawn in not half, but thirds. Yes. And I did a costume change. So, yes, that was my second job, and again, I was so good at just making sure that all of the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed behind the scenes, quietly kept the magician upright. He was a recovering alcoholic. And we had some very good performances, but eventually the magic wore off, shall we say. The script supervisor is a very misnomer because we have nothing to do with the script, other than making sure that the lines are said. But what we do is, again, very much like the stage manager at the theater, I made sure that the creative director could be freed up to exercise genius while I made sure that the props were in the right place, that the lines were delivered, the lights went on at the right time, the lights went off at the right time. But again, I was well suited to it, and I also had learned how to work with the temperament of the creative geniuses and the recovering alcoholic magicians. And my first, I came back to Rhode Island at one time to visit some friends where I had gone to high school. And I was walking the streets and ran into one of my old teachers, Miss Connery. She had taught me history. She was ageless, but she was old. And she was one of those wonderful ladies who always wanted you to take secretarial skills so you could have a job no matter what when you got out of school as a woman. And I never followed her advice, but she was always worried about me for that reason. I didn't type worth a darn. So I ran into Miss Connery, and she made the inquiry with her little bag and her little hat. So what are you doing, dear? And I told her I was a script supervisor in New York. And she said, that's fine. Oh, very good. Okay, well, it's nice to see you. And she moved on. Well, it got back to me that she thought I said strip supervisor. So, from magician's assistant to script supervisor, you know, that's how it goes. But as a script supervisor, my favorite director, and we worked together for many years, was Bob Giraldi. Bob Giraldi is famous for he's famous actually for setting Michael Jackson's hair on fire. I don't know if you all remember, but in the 80s, he did a Pepsi commercial, and Michael Jackson, yes, his hair caught on fire. It was all the news, and I'm telling you right now, they shot that in California without me. If I had been there, never would have happened. The directors are going to go off without me, then they take their risks, they take their gambles. So that was a great, great job that I did for many, many years. And then I came back to Cape Cod, and my most recent job, again, I'm sort of working behind the scenes. I have managed to prop up a wind turbine. So over the winter, I've worked very hard to cross the I's and dot the T's, but somehow it worked out. And I won some feasibility grants, and so my most fabulous director genius to date is a wind turbine on Nantucket that will be going up. So as it spins, I'll be down there holding it up at the base. So that's my story of jobs.
Another hand from Liz Argo.